In my lifetime, I've seen the end of the Cold War. I've seen the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I've seen the end of apartheid. I also saw the signing of the Oslo Accord between then Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat. I've seen capitalism being introduced into China and is alive and well. I've seen also the shift of global owners of capital from the West to Asia and to India. And I've seen other things too. But what I'm also seeing today is that somehow the world is hurtling back to eviscerating some of these gains, and no one is standing up to say, hang on a minute, things feel a little uncomfortable here. Now when we watch our brothers and sisters in Cuba suffer without electricity because of decades of U.S. sanctions, no one is saying no. Haitians are being slaughtered next door and trying to leave daily for a better way of life. No one is saying no. And there's a new brutal war in the Middle East, an ongoing war in Ukraine, a forgotten war in Sudan and the Congo. And blacks, Palestinians, and Jews are being killed daily, all in the name of authoritarianism. But worst of all, when we see the Jamaican news headlines, my blood curdles when I read some of the comments from Jamaicans on the sections of these articles. Because Jamaicans are saying, no man, we must not concern ourselves with over there. Now, I want Jamaicans, especially young Jamaicans, to understand something. You see, as a nation called Jamaica, we have always stood against things in the past and stood up for protecting the dignity and the freedom of people globally. We have always been a revolutionary people destroying contrived dogma intended to enslave anyone to the supremacy of others because of their economic might or geographical size. Yeah, that's who we are. You see, our respect globally was earned by those who went before us because it was their courage that has allowed the rest of us the confidence to hold our head high, our heads high, with self-respect. And young people today may be increasingly aware that, yes, racism still exists, and yes, may have felt its impact depending on where you live globally. However, for those who may have been born in the 1990s, there's something that you don't realize, because some of us knew about apartheid in South Africa, an oppressive system that started in the 1950s and ended basically in 1994. So you might feel that that system, when you learned about it in school, was from the 1800s. No, in my lifetime, I witnessed it through international news, through school discussions, through what our government was doing and promoting against apartheid, because there was a stark disparity in legal privileges between whites and black South Africans. Yes, black South Africans couldn't even participate in politics. And as young Jamaicans, this kind of injustice really spurred a profound disdain among us to support the ending of segregation and brutality faced by black South Africans. And it ignited a spirit of activism for change within us. That's what my generation of Jamaicans and even coming before, that's what we were given. And so whether some countries globally knew what was happening in South Africa when apartheid was implemented and its dominance reigned starting in the 1950s, and some countries chose to stay silent, I am grateful and proud that my country, Jamaica, under the leadership of Norman Manley, was the first country in the Western Hemisphere to declare, even before we were independent from Britain, that we weren't going to trade with South Africa. We weren't going to trade with people who had such restrictions, legal restrictions on black people, that they couldn't use public spaces, they couldn't vote, they're going to be forcibly removed from basic places. And we said we weren't going to trade with them. It was a principled and courageous step. You know why? Because we weren't even independent. No, we weren't. And it is because of those kinds, or that courageous step in particular, and through our international diplomacy and what we boldly stood up for in the world, why Jamaica was recognized as a country that, despite our size and our economic strength, that we were prepared to champion just rights for persons who could not stand up for themselves, even though we were not independent. And it is perhaps why when Jomo Kenyatta was arrested in 1952 by the British, who did he call to represent him and co-head a legal defense team? It was Jamaican Pan-Africanist Ambassador Dudley Thompson. And Jomo Kenyatta went on to become the president of Kenya. Yeah, that's the history. That's the history of who Jamaica is. And so in the 1970s, when Michael Manley declared that, guess what? We were going to trade openly and establish South-South cooperation with Africa and other countries like Brazil and like India. And we were going to have a new economic world order with countries that looked like us, with similar kinds of people. You know what happened? Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State at the time for the United States, visited Jamaica in 1976 and said, look, Manley, stay out of Africa. We didn't. And moreover, when it was detrimental for our own survival in the West to establish diplomatic relations with Cuba and China, we did. And so that's why when Cuba asked Jamaica if they could fuel their planes on our island to help the people of Angola fight for their own democracy, Jamaica said yes. And it is because of this kind of dedicated purpose to recognize the dignity within our fellow men and women across the world, despite their race, their class, their money, revolutionized the way the world saw other people in those countries. It was these principled approaches by Jamaica that led people worldwide to respect us. Because Jamaica has always been seen as a beacon for human rights, justice, political freedom, and equality in human affairs. We're not going to tell you how to run your political life, but we're going to tell you that we don't agree with how you're treating the people. And this is why when Nelson Mandela was freed from prison, and even before he was president of South Africa, in 1994, because I attended that inauguration in South Africa, you want to know the two countries that he visited first? It was Jamaica and Cuba when he was released. And it is why, perhaps, when I arrived in South Africa in 1993 to compete in Miss World, I was emboldened with pride and camaraderie with the Black South Africans. Because I was so humbled by the janitors, the seamstresses, the house attendants, the gardeners. I would sneak out of my room late at night just to sit with them and hear their joy, their gratefulness to Jamaica for the help that we gave them for decades in their struggle of brutality. And our musicians and our reggae music have supported the downtrodden and the invisible globally for many years. And also here at Jamaica, they're the vanguards of hope and revolution that gives us that kind of fighting spirit. The Bob Marley Freedom Concert in Zimbabwe, the haunting lyrics of people like Peter Tosh and Burning Spear and Dennis Brown and Bunny Wailer, and even today like a Kabaka and a Damian Manley. I could go on, a Protege, a Jesse, I could go on, and our women, our Janines, our Savannahs. This is a new generation, and it is what they're singing about. But I grew up immersed in a system of revolution, calling on the world to do better for the oppressed and for the downtrodden, because you know what? No matter where we come from, the cradle of civilization, we all know, is that we have to protect Africa and the rest of the world. So therefore, we have a responsibility to continue our activism for our own sake. For our own sake. And because when we do it for others, it protects us. I want you to think about what I just said. We have a responsibility to continue our activism for our own sake and for others who are being pushed into suffocation. Especially now that we're witnessing the worst underbelly of extreme right fascism being exposed on global political platforms daily by some seeking the power of leadership. So as Jamaicans, we can't stand by and watch any emergence of Apartheid 2.0, whether overtly or covertly. We as Jamaicans have always stood on the right side of history. And you know that I support certain kinds of human rights, maybe you don't. But it's time that we ask ourselves that if we renege on our duty of activism and on standing up for what is principled for other people, if we renege on that, what's going to happen to the future of our children or our grandchildren, whether in Jamaica or in the diaspora? Because Jamaica's unwavering commitment to justice and equality has inspired the world. So I want you to remember this before we seek to declare or you seek to declare, you know what, over there is not our problem, either to no one. We can't. That's not who we are. That's never been who we are. And if we want to continue being proud Jamaicans, punching way above our weight class of 3 million people and having the kind of resonance in the world, then we have to start looking inward and start asking ourselves, what are we committed to do for the least of us? Because it is tomorrow for you or today for me. So let's have a conversation about it. And let's remember why we are Jamaicans.